by over 50% from the period that we started this conversation. But this reduction itself has been greatly unfair and unequal. That whereas this reduction is taking place in some parts of the world, in other parts of the world, we are saturated. And Nigeria is one of those countries that has been saturated as a result of poor education financing. But one thing that may interest you to note is that even before the world started any conversation around education financing, Nigeria started it. 30 years, almost 30 years ago, Nigeria instituted education tax, which was one of the first ever in Africa. And I'm happy Dr. Muswa Bintobe is here and the clerk of that Senate Committee on Tertiary Education and TED Fund, and is very much conversant with the history of that. That was when the country decided to say that, look, what we are getting from our public funds may not be adequate to finance our education, and therefore we need the private sector to support education for us. How far have we gone since then? What are we doing right? What are we not doing right? And what can we do differently? This is what this conversation is all about. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Don't go away. Wait for the panel discussion. Wait for the presentation later after the tea break. Let's have Angel Asu. Angel, yes, from Government Secondary School, Kubwa, right? Junior Secondary School, Kubwa. I attended government school, so just like you now. I attended government secondary school, Pastor Teachers College, Zaria, ABU, Zaria. I cannot send my children to government schools now. Let's help ourselves. But this is a very beautiful government student from the public school, and we know that the government schools are still trying. All we need to do is to give a little push, isn't it? Just give us a good message. What do you think about education?
I feel like Nigeria needs as much funding as it needs for the education of children. Schools in Nigeria need as much infrastructure and buildings to enable better learning of students. Insecurities in Nigeria is really not good. That's why some parents don't even let their children to come to school. I feel like COVID-19 was an eye-opener because as the people have said, during this COVID-19, only the wealthiest children were allowed to go to school. Parents of the poor couldn't afford all the necessities to be able to come to school. So I feel like funding in Nigeria is very essential so that students can start from the grassroots to be able to raise to the tertiary level of education. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Angel. Thank you very much. I think we don't have the minister or his representative to give us the keynote. I think the Angel's goodwill is the keynote, right? So are we adopting Angel's goodwill as the keynote? Thank you very much. A round of applause for her again. So we don't have a good photograph with a few persons here. We'll go for tea break, then we'll go to the next session. Thank you very much. Good photograph here. Dr. Naire, please join them. Mr. Wale, please join them. Hamza, please join them for good photograph. Angel and her friends, please join them. Barrister Esther, you can join them. The NUT representative, you can join them here. Quickly, we don't have time. Just one NUT representative. Dr. Oji from Plan, you can join them. Mr. Jonathan, yes, from NUT. Dr. Bede, you can join them. The TRCN representative, you can join them. They can be in front. Why? Can you think you go? Okay. Somebody from the students with disability.
Has it fixed?
Yeah.
Can you subscribe to Netflix?
Are you supposed to find your
Send me a message.
Yes.
No, pull it down now.
They don't pull it down. So
Don't pull it
you're
down.
fine. Not like,
Tell him that this is who you are.
in the future, I think we are hiding something. So
Where
drop
you're
your face
from.
mask so that we can see you not hiding anything.
And when it's free. Did Anthony come this morning? He didn't send a message.
Just the education so that you can start with 1, 2, 3, go. Sorry. 1, 2, 3, go. Education. Education. For all. So T is theft. Okay, we are following online handlers. We thank you. To join us online, we thank you. T is theft for those that are taking T. You have to take it for T before we go to the next. T is theft for those that want to take T, please. You have 15 minutes.
You might change my life.
The high table. T is theft, not the. Hello, please, we will have the next presentation by 10 minutes past 1. 10 minutes past 1. The next presentation, 10 minutes past 1 by Dr. Tefa. Dr. Tefa will get ready for the next presentation, please.
There's only one page.
Yes, only one. Everything I said is here.
Why don't you want to go?
Yeah, I'm scanning someone.
So if you do that, I give you the paper. I'm a paper person.
No, I also jot some few points.
Good morning, sir.
Morning. Can I snap it and send you also?
You
He doesn't want to
lifted
give me
all
his
the
paper. You
things that,
lifted all
all the
everything
things
he's
in
gonna
my
be discussing.
Really?
the panel
Yes.
discussion.
I
Like
thought this is great minds. What do they do?
you lifted. I was like, what's wrong with this guy? Did you see my notes?
This is Khadija. Hi, Khadija. He's
Hello.
gonna be the panelist.
I hacked our system yesterday night and picked us.
Oh, I didn't even
No
know.
wonder.
I just,
Now it makes sense.
Yeah.
I was like, what? This guy is really talking.
I just wanted to add what you
It,
said.
everything is here, just 5 points. I think. Let me snap and send you WhatsApp. You can, when you zoom it ahead, it's clear now. When you zoom it, you
You
can
just send it to the team so
Yeah,
they can copy it.
I don't know his number, so I'm gonna send it to mine. So
Mm. So that's Khadija, where with which organization? Card.
she'll give you
Okay.
the card. We work together. So
National.
no. Oh no. We do our own little thing.
Oh, okay.
So how do you send it to me?
Do you use iPhone?
No, I don't.
Okay, do your number then.
See, you just assume my number started with an 08. See? It didn't.
Your mentions. Okay.
So we work together.
This is my number.
Okay. Where is the calling from?
Where is my
Such a word.
Maxine, we're into humanitarian development,
Okay.
journalism, and social development.
Oh.
So all the
Do you have a kind of an online presence?
we do.
Yes. Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Salam alaikum. Now in I just told them that he lifted most of the things that I was going to discuss.
That everything you're going to say, that
Not everything, just like a few,
just say that someone
like
got
about
into her
3
head.
points.
See, that's what he did. He just went
He
straight into her
hacked
head.
into my
Is
account.
that your number?
Yes.
So how do you send it to me?
Murtala. I just give you a missed call now. So when you save it, then I can search in what? Murtala is the name.
You can see we are registered with this at
Okay.
Zakepa.
Beyond mentors.
Yes, Beyond Mentors Community Care Initiative.
That is that?
Murtala, MURTAL.
Okay,
Yeah.
no, the second you.
Yeah, the U is yes. The UNICEF. Control officer. Yeah. And your name?
Oh, culture office.
Country of.
Country office. Okay.
We have 9 field officers.
You're going to love our magazine. So
And do you have an online presence that
We do.
PDF version of all these things?
we do, but
Dr.
our
Who?
app is
Didi.
down now.
Didi.
BD. Let me stand up for you, B.
Our app is down now,
Okay.
but we can get you the hard copy. Yeah,
Okay.
we can. Yeah.
Okay. I would love to have the.
Okay, do you just put the whole 2 names together? Does it matter?
Okay. Easy.
Easy, yeah.
Okay. Then the organization is
Beyond
Beyond
Mentors
Mentors.
Community Care Initiative. BMCCI.
BMCCI. So that's Beyond Job Ready.
BMCCI.
BMCCI. So I'm waiting for this. If not, I'm.
I'll send it to you now.
Wait, if not, I'm
You
going.
can't take me anywhere, can you?
Easy.
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 Oh,
I
oh, it's here. So you get it right away to your WhatsApp.
My
Are you leaving? Are you staying for the party?
No, I'll stay for the panel.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll stay for the panel. After the panel, then I can.
So I think this is it.
Yeah. I'll open it.
Let me go give it to you. I don't see it.
So
You're still
you
here.
can just, I don't know how this angle works. If they have email, you can just click send to email. Once you send to email, they'll print it.
So we're just going to add it to our.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
You're
Nice to see
welcome.
you.
You're welcome.
You're calling me.
No.
If you're a former governor,
Hmm?
you will deal with you.
Really? I think my Oh, I can't. No. It's not ready. I just have an idea of what because the UM people are yet. So I'm going to business and science. Yeah, this few. You gave me the idea. Yeah. Obasanjo said something. that there are two things that you cannot buy: age and experience. And the person has the right to do this. So just give me the idea. Go and put something inside you before they give me on. So 0 is 0. 0 8 6 1 5 4 6 6 0 8
Just talking to yourself. Who are you having a dialogue with? Who are you asking?
It's Nigeria. No,
It's Robert is a Ugandan.
Oh, okay.
He's the director of operation.
That's operation.
Yeah, for plan.
Operation is that this is like day food or
Yes, no.
Eh?
Yes.
Finance.
Finance.
They give them
Yes, no.
operations. Our life is.
No, his leadership is interim. He's not continuous. He just interim. They are recruiting. It's just that they were very slow in starting.
They are slow and they are
Because I resigned in November. The process. They didn't advertise until
wasn't the protest before you left.
Yeah, you couldn't. But they wanted me to extend. And I said, look, you are discussing extension now. But you have not even advertised. So how much time is enough for the extension? Because if you advertise,
I don't know what I don't know what ordinarily caused this delay in the recruitment.
Dr. Sefa, can you get
Ordinarily,
ready?
they are supposed to be an overlap.
Dr. Sefa, can you get ready?
yes.
So that yes, in-house. It's not like the 1 week or 2 weeks or even 2 weeks.
Yeah.
You take it out.
The only thing I did was just I committed myself to give them to anyone they recruit. I give them 2 weeks. That's all.
That's very good.
So I just did that commitment.
So that's actually a very good one. If not, and we are looking for you. Well, look, gender. You have rejected gender.
Yeah, no. After a month, we take it.
Yeah, that is it.
Should take over.
That's what I'm saying. I'm telling you, you have.
Still not since I left action with the women.
Yeah. I'm not to say.
That's the principle. But I don't think we will get there. Yeah, because you know they're still.
Yes, that is how it's supposed to be.
I'm happy with that. They've been responsible, you know, and trust, the trust.
Yeah.
May I interrupt this masculine?
Oh yes, you should. I just say that
The energy in you.
when you bring in, it's about shake table, you know.
No, I break
It's not,
table.
okay, shaking is
I'm one of your followers on Instagram,
diplomatic finance.
and I get to see the energy during the end transport. When you do those social videos, even before the Delta crisis, you have been.
No, she's been consistent.
Yes.
So when I was a considerate in Canada, I just prayed. Working with a girl who had seen what the one that made her fall. How can you get her into the center with passion? And this is our conversation. Yes.
Take them random.
Yes.
No, it's true.
Okay. Okay. That, yes,
At the center. At the center of the issue.
Yeah.
Thank you.
okay. Now money matter.
Yeah, so you know, the work, yeah, no, it's not I want money to buy t-shirts, the young girl has no, the young girl has she was going to herself the first one. That increase in homes by the house systems. And take into account of the people are making silly demands. The 7-year-old is now 14-year-old. Own violence.
Absolutely.
The
We have
mother
to
is
protect.
already traumatized. The government is taken not to know that all of this is happening in Lagos.
Yeah.
So I want to mobilize all the women actors, because every woman until we come to the money I'm looking for. Shirts that says all of this.
There's this,
So you see the money I'm looking for.
yeah, and I begin to think about
Yeah,
there is UN.
Dr. Tifa, we're ready for you.
I'm part of the
Hello?
So I just
Yes.
We
Yeah.
can't stand any more movement.
But you can't. UN is not the place to contact for a Monday. No, but action has
Dr. Tifa, we're ready for you.
related kind of funding.
Yes.
They can be very quick and support.
So that we go
What's the name?
sit down and share with them.
Yeah, women's
Make
rights.
something like
In case you need to go here.
all of them.
I'm looking for engagement.
So whoever is here, I don't know. We just say, in fact, I don't care. We don't know what the money is to us. We
Actually
tell you
can
how
make
many
it.
we are.
Yeah.
Bring the food,
Actually can make it quick.
Okay, fine.
Because today is Friday.
Yeah, I understand.
You understand? But your own is because I'm in that steering committee. If you take proposals, it will take.
After now.
Yes. After now, yes.
And when I'm looking at, I'll tell you, we are not See, I believe that there's a lot to hear that was saying. Right now, filmmakers are only discuss about playing we want to keep us heavily culturally widespread. I'm not about cultural rights. I don't care.
Yeah.
That is our fight.
You know, this being politically correct.
Yeah,
because
I
they-
don't want to be I want to define how to do that.
Yeah.
I think that I'm looking at
Those on the item,
something.
okay. I don't know if you choose to sit here so that you can see the screen, or you just listen to him while he does the presentation. You can we plant this a little? Can we plant this a little?
I want to take a quick selfie. I want to take a quick selfie.
Okay, please. He's here. He's here.
Thank you. That was a brilliant speech.
Yes. Yeah. You know that.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. It's I'm extremely happy to be with you, especially on this great education day. I acknowledge the high table and every person from the ministry, CSOs, think tank, resource persons, and every other person that has been a stakeholder, an active player in our development process with the education sector. My name is Tefa Abraham. I have a PhD in economics. I'm a product of ABU Zaria. I'm a researcher and I'm an economist and public policy analyst based in Abuja. But the business today is about financing the education sector. And I've been following all the messages, let me not call it goodwill that I learned from our men that spoke, but I've been following all the messages and about education finance. But if we want to advocate or push for action, if we don't need what we want to say on the board, then we give room for everyone to just push us left and right. So the person we are holding onto account is federal government financing of education. Let's make it clearly. Because if we allow that fish to swim freely in the ocean, then it will go beyond, it will become a bit difficult to know who to engage, when and how. So our business today is federal government financing of education. One thing I assure you you'll be getting from this presentation is that beyond the usual budgetary allocation, I want to show you details of how actual spending is done across the Federal Ministry of Education as an agency, and then UBE, mass literacy, and other programs. And I said the Federal Ministry of Education as an agency because even the public sometimes don't understand how the Federal Ministry of Education works. That big agency you see, the amount of money you see as their allocation in the budget is not for them alone. There's allocation to Ministry of Education, total. Then there's allocation for Ministry of Education as headquarters. Then it goes to UBE, mass literacy, unity schools, and things like that. Okay. Okay, Action Aid is an active CSO that has been pushing for increase in budgetary allocation to social sectors, including agriculture, health, and education sector. And this is within the context of Action Aid governance program that has a core mandate to enhance people's power in democratic and inclusive governance, especially persons with disabilities. So Action Aid believes that poverty is created by human beings. And one of the drivers of that poverty is poor education that is predetermined by poor funding of that sector. So the business of this presentation is to show you the trend of public spending, federal government spending on education, to identify, next slide please. To identify the gaps that exist within what is expected for us to attain SDG 4, and then what we are recommending in terms of call for action and possible set of recommendations. Now, aside the challenges that we've been having as a country in financing primary, secondary, tertiary education, adult education, every form of education, COVID-19 dealt a big blow on that sector. If you look at the performance of Nigeria's GDP in 2019, I'm just controlling this slide myself. I'm trying to save time, so just keep going until you get. Okay, great. If you look at the effect of COVID-19 on the education sector, the particular slide I'm looking for is the one that shows how Nigeria's budget or all the sectors of the Nigerian economy performed during the COVID-19 period. So if you look at this trend, first of all, this is just mere monetary, how would I put it down? The mere size of the Nigerian budget, federal government budget. So if you look at it from 2016, it has been increasing up to 2021, which is 13.59 trillion. So what you have, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, is a steady, rising, increasing trend of allocation for federal government budget, but that is not being accompanied by sustainable or inclusive development indices. So as this federal government budget is increasing, can we say poverty has been decreasing? Can we say out of school children have been decreasing? Can we say hunger and unemployment have been decreasing? Yet federal government budget in terms of size have been increasing steadily every year. And the way it works in economic thinking is that increase in expenditure should be accompanied by increase in development outcomes. So you want to see that you are spending on your child at nursery or play group. And then after that class or stage, the child learns what is commensurate with the fees you've been paying and what is expected based on the educational curriculum. So you use that to judge. When the child gets to primary school, you expect that the child too would have learned what is expected. For secondary school, the same thing, university, the same thing. In fact, even more importantly, you enroll your ward in a fashion school. After 2 years or 6 months or 1 year, you'll be happy to see that he or she can go. But guess what? We hold ourselves accountable. We hold our children, our ward accountable. But we don't hold the federal government accountable with the same measure of interest and passion we do to ourselves at home. If you give your house help or assistant money for meat, how much that give you for meat? Is this money, is this quantity equivalent to the meat? You try to evaluate, and then when you get the message, you hold on. But how do we go with the government? We've not been, yes, we've been engaging, no doubt, but if you listen to all the messages at the beginning, everyone is calling for more action in this regard. So great. What you have the federal government say is that the share of capital expenditure has been increasing from 23% in 2020 budget to 30% in the 2021 budget. So the share of capital expenditure in federal government budget has been increasing. But how about the allocation to the education sector? Great. If you look at this, is just a snapshot of selected sectors that we classify as social sectors. You have humanitarian affairs. In 2021, education budget accounted for 5.13% of total federal government budget. And in 2021, despite all the lessons from COVID-19, the share of education budget was still 5.something%, which is extremely far off, far below what is recommended by SDG 4 framework of 15 to 20%, not to talk about other framework or recommendation as we will see it in due course. So, one thing I want to call attention to is the political economy of budgeting for education sector. UBE has an allocation that is contained in statutory allocation. And from outward look, it will seem to you as though anything UBE is on first line charge and given priority allocation. That's what it looks like if you carry the hard copy of the federal government budget. But if you've been working on the budget like I've been doing so far, you will realize that UBE allocation is still part of the total allocation contained in total allocation to Federal Ministry of Education as a whole. So that 70 billion you see under statutory allocation for UBE is still contained in the overall 771 billion for education. And they split it into recurrent and capital. I want to call your attention to this. If you look at statutory allocation, you will think that this 70 billion, everything will go to UBE and it will be used for capital projects. But we realize that this 70 billion is split into capital and recurrent and become part of total education budget. So the education budget of 771 billion, for instance, in 2021, is split into recurrent of 545 billion, capital expenditure of 556 billion. This is the component of UBE. Then you have this. If you work that out, you have 5.68%, which is still way below what is expected to get us to attain SDG 4. So basically, what you can see from this trend is that since 2016 and even beyond, or before that time, you notice that there's a declining trend. This is the normal allocation in terms of the share of education in the federal government budget. But if you fit a linear trend, what you see is a declining trend, which is this dotted line. So basically, in terms of sustainability, there has been no commitment to education funding. If there has been commitment, you will observe that this graph will behave systematically. It's okay to release high this year, reduce the next year, increase next year, or that kind of pattern. The bottom line is that this curve is not stable, it's oscillating, it's fluctuating. So it is difficult to say that by this allocation, the commitment has been stable. But don't forget, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, that these figures you are looking at is just mere allocation. Allocation, budgeted, what is promised, what is past appropriation act. Now, look at this graph. Sometimes in December 2017, the Minister of Education, Adamu, argued, or he wanted to fact check where we all got this idea from, that UNESCO said 26% of budget should be for education. So he engaged the media. This is, if you believe the UNESCO 26% education, this is where that line is. This is where our actual allocation is. So let's assume, oh, UNESCO this says so, it's wrong, it's okay. Then, using Sustainable Development Goal 4 framework that recommends 15 to 20%, our education allocation should be around this blue and green line. But look at where we are. Okay, if you don't believe SDG 4 framework, let's go with the minister. The minister is someone in the government, he knows. Based on the minister's engagement, the minister said that to attain a better education for all in Nigeria, we should be looking at 1 trillion every year. So 1 trillion every year. 1 trillion as a percentage of overall federal government budget. This is it. This is it. This is it. Even that 1 trillion are below. So you can go on and on. The statement of problem here is that there is deficit, huge gap in education financing. If nothing is done that is extraordinary in terms of financial programming, we are not likely to go anywhere near SDG 4, let alone the actual effect of educational outcome that you and I see every day. Somebody spoke about the challenge of having reliable data when doing education financing programming. And I put this slide here to buttress that point. If you look at this chart, you see that in 2016, it's as if the share of education budget in the federal government budget was 9.17%. If you look here, you see that it's even less in the other slide. Remember, for 2020, I showed you earlier that was 5.something%. This other slide is showing 6. It's not as if this researcher is wrong or that researcher is correct. It's the data challenge. Education budget is presented to the public as though UBE is separate. So when analysts are looking for education data, they go to the chapter on education, that 700 and something billion they see, they add UBE to it. Not knowing that UBE is already contained therein. This is where researchers miss it with education figures when it comes to federal government budget. So with that kind of information, what we see is very poor data, even for planning education. So what we do is to engage the entire budget. We go line by line through a very tedious text review process to identify what was UBE and where it was contained. So when we do that, you begin to find the real figures where I was telling you about 5.something% and 5.61%. Recall earlier, this was the chart I was looking for. This is a clear graph of Nigeria's real GDP performance in 2019 and 2020. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, education is the one I painted in pink. I use pink because education sector is very unfair to women and girls. So I use that pink to capture their attention. Education sector was the third most hit sector by COVID-19. Look at the other sectors that were mostly affected. Transportation and storage. This transportation includes aviation. and aviation was contained in COVID-19 intervention fund. Nobody will allow aviation just go like that. So bottom line, transportation has backbone in terms of support. The second one, accommodation and food. Once you allow hotels and industries to open, everything picks up. All government programs alone we make this sector to rise in less than no time. And the third most hit is education. Who is education's backbone? What is the allocation to education as COVID-19 intervention fund for primary, secondary, tertiary? In very clear terms, something that principal will agree with you that he or she has seen the alert, if not only on the government program. This is the challenge. So if real GDP, education's contribution to real GDP fell in 2020 by minus 13.57%. In 2019, education contributed 0.8% to Nigeria's real GDP growth. With all the talk about human capital, that is how much we contribute to GDP. All the talk of human capital we have. The contribution to real GDP in 2019, pre-COVID-19, is 0.8. During COVID-19, minus. And you and I know what researchers did to AstraZeneca vaccine, what they did to Johnson and Johnson. You know what universities are doing? Johns Hopkins alone had a very good database for which all of us rely upon to look or find COVID-19 data. But Nigerian universities or tertiary institutions don't even have the lights to hold long meetings to deliberate how to design those programs. The toilet, once you enter there, you are going home. But that cannot happen in Johns Hopkins. Because to be able to engage, you need water, you need clean toilet facility, you need security. Nobody wants to gather for a conference in a university and everybody has been taken hostage. This is the challenge we have. So what you have or what you see in Nigeria is that any person you see contributing to the human capital to Nigeria's GDP is either being extremely innovative or doing so under a lot of stress. So this is how COVID-19 is affecting the sector. Okay. Great. What we did in this slide, just this slide, is to show you, initially all I've been saying is about the allocation, right, in terms of size. How is this allocation distributed across projects? We just took this so you have an idea. What you see as capital budget for education, it's not as if they will say a provision of retirement plan for all teachers, including security. That's not what you see. This is a typical project list contained in federal government budget for education. For example, number 8, renovation of 5 blocks of boys' hostels and 3 blocks of girls' hostels. Where? Which school? Which state? Which local government? So that CSO can go and track. So the budget will not even allow you that much information to track or monitor. But if they say hello, they said that we renovate this hospital.
How are you? How are you? How are you? Yeah, fine. Are you? So, ah, with your with Asokoro. Then what do I put here? That's right. Function.
there must be revenue, for it to occur. But unfortunately for us, and also to understand the extent of our expectation as a country, we'll be having revenue challenges, and it continues. And not just the impact of COVID, but also looking at the physical space entirely that continually is closing. As a country today, we are borrowing money. The welcome address mentioned some figure, but we are at the same time giving out our resources on tax incentive. The core aim of this project is looking at the tax revenue and how that can help fund education, in Nigeria. But unfortunately, a country that is using 80% of its revenue to service debt, I don't think there's hope. In the last quarter of 2020, more than 90% of our revenue was used to service debt. The debt, which is today more than 68 billion USD, an increase of, let's say, from 2010 to the present, it has moved from 35 billion to what it is today.
allocated for education. That's really sad. For me, I was telling my colleague, I said, yeah, I'm tired of this talk. All I need is action. What are we going to do when we leave this place? We have more mothers here. Education is, like she has said, a lot of people have said a lot of things that I wanted to say. But just to buttress the things, before I even say that, Dr. Tarfa, that was a very beautiful, presentation. That's really an eye-opener. About recent allocation for 5-point-something% that was given, I feel that we don't have enough empathetic leadership for them to know that after COVID-19, we're still in COVID-19, we have not gotten out of it. After COVID-19, with over 83 million out of school, because when we keep saying that 10-point-something million, during the lockdown, 70 million of our children were out of school. So you think that people who really care, who truly care about what we stand for as the giant Africa, should do something and be much more proactive about what education should be by now. This year should be, at least if it's not something around 15%, it should be around 10 to 12%. That is what we should be looking at. And there's so much to be said, but I'd like to hand over to somebody else, so that, because there's a lot of solutions. Somebody lifted my points today, but
Okay.
we're going to continue the discussion.
Okay, thank you. I have a couple of questions here for the panel. What has been the trend on education allocation and investment as compared to the overall national budget? I know we have trashed that issue. We talked about the percentage release that we were discussing. And it's never too much to talk about this issue of budgeting for education. But I will still ask a question related to that, so we can talk about it. What are the gaps with regards to the regional responses and the global expectation to this education financing we're discussing about? Dr. Abdul, if you can, what are the gaps with regards to the regional responses and the global expectations?
Thank you very much, colleagues. And I want to join my colleagues on this side of the table to thank Dr. Fefa for leading this conversation and doing a very brilliant research on education financing at the federal level. I think it's a very brilliant research work and has also brought out some of those salient issues that are often of concern. Many times we look at only budgetary allocations and we don't check the actual releases. And allocation don't actually tell us the reality or the facts on ground. So you've been able to bring that out. But does this reflect the reality of education financing in the country? I don't think so. Does this reflect clearly what he's been asked to do? I think he's done that brilliantly so. Because what he's been asked to do, probably from his terms of reference, is to look at federal allocations. I come from a background of also budget analysis, and one of those early generation budget analysts. And I knew at a point in my career, what I was doing was supporting close to 23 African countries on issues like this. But at a point, I reached a conclusion and I said, probably the kind of budget analysis we see in many other countries is not what we need to do in Nigeria. If pick Ghana's budget, I know that I'm speaking about the entire Ghana. If I pick this budget, even though Kenya has decentralized, but when it comes to budget, it's still centralized. I know I'm speaking about the entire Kenyan budget. But if I pick Nigeria national budget, I'm probably speaking about 51% of Nigeria's resources, because 49% of it goes to states and local government. And therefore, it does not tell me the total reality of the country. And then there are also other extra constitutional or extra structural institutions that funds education, that sometimes you don't find them deeply reflected even in the national appropriation processes. You take the budget of TED funds. To what extent is it enshrined in the details of Ministry of Education? It's a federal fund, and arguably the largest you have in the country, massively the biggest funder of Nigerian universities and polytechnics at the moment, but you don't see it. If you don't reflect that, you haven't actually said it. And then if you go NNPC do a lot of education interventions. In budget, you don't see, you can capture. So there are different government, is Central Bank of Nigeria, a big theater, lecture theaters in many places, supported training of teachers and university academics, but it doesn't reflect. So this is not the researcher's problem. This is the problem of our structure and the way of managing our resources. And so if we don't get those details, we may not be able to do much about it. And take, for instance, universal basic education is one of our major and primary concerns. And basic education still lies largely at state and local government level. The federal government only finances unity schools. And there are how many unity schools in the country? Maximum 3 per state on the maximum, mainly 2 per state, but maximum 3 per state. And by the time you take the number of unity school, it is actually not up to 2% of the total secondary schools in the country. So this makes it very difficult for us to actually be able to measure gaps. But the reality is that surely education is underfunded. Using all the parameters that you can actually think about, even from the beginning of the EFA goals, which we are all very much aware of, to our commitment to the UNESCO commitment, to all our commitment in relation to GPE, the Global Partnership for Education. So if you check all the details, you'll find out that we didn't meet our MDG goals. There is no sign that we can actually meet our SDG education goals, looking at our current funding systems and streams. And I actually think, of course, probably there will be time to discuss those conversations. I think we need to begin to reassess how we measure education financing. I'm really concerned that our measure of education financing from the perspective of budget is not correct. It doesn't speak to the issues, and I hope that the conversation will lead us today will lead us to how best we can measure education financing in the country. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Maybe I should repeat the question again for next. We're looking at what are the gaps with regards to regional responses and global expectations with regards to education finance. What are the gaps? NUT, you are part of government. You are part of government. You fight government, but you are still part of government. So what are the gaps with regards to regional responses and global expectations?
Take it off.
The gap are quite enormous. Just like the presenter, Dr. Tafar, actually put it. Earlier before now, I made you to understand that the statistics carried by my office, that is at the National Head Office, will give you a clear picture of one of the gaps. In 2017, the total number of primary school teachers that we have in this country, as when we talk of public primary school, was 549,253. And that of secondary school was 310,784, totaling 860,037. While in 2019, we have a total primary school of 506,142, while that of secondary school is 289,238, totaling 795,380. If you jack off that of 2017 to 2019, we now realize a balance of 64,657. This is the gap, the number of shortfall of teachers we record within the space of 2 years, 2017 to 2019. And that tells you the ratio of teacher-student-pupils relationship. So the gap is quite enormous from the global expectation and that of the regional expectation. Okay, take a look at this. If by the recent Homegrown School what I earlier mentioned, I told you that the increase in enrollment of pupils has actually increased. But we don't have commensurate teachers to match up these pupils in their classes, thereby giving room for a haphazard learning environment, which will amount to so much gaps. So the gaps are too much to measure. So I feel that my other colleagues will still add more voice to the gaps. Meanwhile, let me add my voice.
Thank you. I think as we debate education finance with emerging and trending issues or challenges like insecurity, and also coming out from COVID-19, for the campaign we've done for over a decade to get children back to school, when you talk to parents, they're not comfortable sending their kids back to school. And mind you, some of the schools we don't have water, but now parents would say, okay, fine, they don't have water, no toilet, but let them go. But now with insecurity, it means that we need to also review the kind of finances that has to go to the educational sector. And hopefully this will not contribute to the numbers of adult school children and take us back, to the campaign that we fought over the years. But I think for me also, as much as we're looking at capital expenditure, building more classrooms and renovating existing ones, what are the learning outcomes for children? Because when you say the gap, for me, put a student going to private school and another student going to public school, there's a huge gap in terms of the learning outcome. I remember in 2017, working in Borno State, when we engaged Borno State Universal Basic Education Board, for over 20 years that some of them have worked for Borno State, they've never gone for any training before, never. And they're members of NUC, they've never gone for any training, both by government or development partners. So it's what the teachers know that they can transfer to these kids. And now we're dealing with technology. So during the lockdown, some of our friends abroad will tell you that their kids are attending class on Zoom. But people I know in public schools never attended any program. For some that the government, because I know Kaduna State had learning materials via radio and television, there is no power for these children to attend. And then there's this dynamic. So male child, it affects male different from how it affects females. So when we did our research, because I'm also a Malala Fund champion, so in Kaduna State and in Borno State, we did a research of the impact of COVID-19 on girls. So over 73% of the girls did not have time to even learn because they had house chores, while the boys are allowed to go and play football, but the girls are compelled to undertake house chores during the lockdown or to hawk and support the family. So some of the girls are contributing to the livelihood of their family. So I think when we continue to debate education finance, there are different dynamics to it. You know, like I said, now we have technology. And just to mention lastly, what's the value of educating one child in a public school? And I'll use myself as an example. So I went to a public primary school, but right now, honestly, I cannot even advise anyone to send their kids to that school. Model primary school here in Asoko. It used to be one of the best in the early 90s. And at that time, it cost my father 500 naira for a term. And we get decent education and even free meals. So this homegrown school feeding program, I enjoyed it back then. You know, they gave us nutritious meals during break, so I don't have to go with any lunch box to school. And it was just 500 naira it cost my dad at that time to educate me per term. So for the 6 years, that's 3,000 naira. But with 3,000 naira, even in states that there are free education, there are hidden fees. And this has made a lot of poor people withdraw their children from school. So for me, as we debate education finance, security plays a very big role. You know, our schools secure, public schools, particularly at the grassroots, do they have wash facility? And are this also taken into cognizance when we do budget planning? Because a lot of government needs assessment are not informing our budgets. You know, they just change the year of the budget and it's the same line item. Just a few will just change, or they change the figures. It's almost the same. Thank you.
Okay. It reminds me of a friend of mine, admission into ABU, and he came and stood and said, I'm going to spend those 16,000 naira from 100 level to 400 level. His school fees. From 100 to 400 level, he's going to spend 16,000 naira only. And he was asking the school if he can pay ahead from 100 to 400 level. Can you pay 16,000 naira semester today? Can you? I want to throw a challenge to these IT organizations. Has anybody thought of doing a research? How much was spent by parents and students during the lockdown to buy data? Have any civil society organizations sat down to do a research what was spent by parents and students during the lockdown to buy data? How much was spent by government to sponsor radio, television teaching? How much was spent? How much? Somebody did a research during the lockdown. He said it will cost Nigeria 200 billion to reopen schools. He was calculating face masks, hand sanitizers, hand wash, and everything. Only public school, 200 billion. I'll beg the civil society organization to do a research and give us the outcome. If you can, how much was spent during the lockdown on data by students and their parents, and approximate. It will help. In future, we know if we have another lockdown, we will know how much we need to look into. Okay. We have some people in the floor that want to speak. There is a deaf. Is it deaf now? A lady with disability that has been to talk. So once we get the last person trashed by the panel, we throw it open to you. Just be patient. Thank you.
Hello. So you asked about the gaps, about So I feel that one of the biggest gaps that goes to the root of all the problems we are having in Nigeria is leadership. And we need to address that. What the AA and country directors, she said something about we need to repent. We need to put ourselves in the shoes of the people who cannot afford basic education. We keep sending our children to school abroad. We're still going to, those children are still going to come back here. And they're going to meet with all the other children here. And they're going to live with them. Because nowhere in this world can ever be home to them like the home of their father's house. So I'm still going to, about empathetic leadership, what has been burning in my mind is, number one, we thought the political will. Somebody mentioned the political will. Do we have enough political will? I mean, look at the body language. The Minister of Education is supposed to be here. Is he serious enough about this dialogue? So, is he serious about the budget? Is he really serious about this dialogue we're having? Is it just for us to talk and then everything will just go? We'll go back to bed again. That's number one. Look at the body language is shouting, and all the other legislators that came in with their own people, all of them represented the main people who are going to push this communique you're going to send to them are not here. What Dr. Abdullah Husseini said will not be, it's just in the paper. How do we know this paper is going to get to them? Then another thing that one of the panelists spoke about on teachers, if the leadership issues are well rectified in Nigeria, we shouldn't be having issues with teachers. We have 774 local government in Nigeria, and a lot of teachers do not want to go to the local government areas. In 2015 or thereabouts, I run a humanitarian journalism magazine. We went to TikTok, and we went there, and the deplorable state of the schools made me cry. It's painful that children cannot, they do not, the place, I don't even want to mention it because I'm sure that a lot of people have seen what the state of our schools are. What will it take for a leader to know that these things are not rocket science at all? These things can be done. I mean, if Action Aid and Plan or maybe other places in the world are coming to give money, I know that GP donated about 12 million or thereabout for the education of girls. I know recently, I think it was last year or something. All these monies we've been talking about, if we have empathetic leadership, it's just to go to each of these local government areas and and ensure that all the schools there are well equipped, are done very well. You don't need to be, the follow the money doesn't have to go there. Train the local government chairman in that community to understand responsibility, to understand that it's not about the crown that you put on your head, it's about the responsibility, and all of us as mothers must understand that fact. The leadership in this country is bad because some of the mothers are just busy talking about, oh, my son is a minister, my son is, and we're looking at what they will bring. We're not reminding them of the responsibility that the crown they are wearing should be about understanding that having this position, wherever you are, there's a responsibility to it. And on the day of judgment, God is going to ask you, I gave you this opportunity to do this thing for this set of people. What did you do with it? I mean, even the teachers, for the teacher thing, what I've been thinking is that one of the solutions that we should look at is about the policies. if we have empathetic leadership. Put down the policies that anybody that goes to that goes to the local government areas will have more pay, more their children will be well taken care of. They have like a consensus for children that okay, your children will be so and so. Give them beautiful incentives, give them good pension, pay their pension on time, give them good facilities, train them. Let them understand the responsibility of being a teacher and understanding the law, that how it's going to come back to you. Whatever we do as civil society, it's not that we're doing it because we want people to know. We are doing it because it's a selfish mode. What I've been doing for the past 14 years is because I am afraid, I am scared that if I don't do anything in my little corner, it's going to come back and haunt me. Then what is my motherhood about if I don't care enough? All of these policies should be in place. When you put all of these policies in place, then we know who, but we'll know who to be held accountable. But do even Nigerians know the kind of leaders they want? Do they even know what they want? Because they are the ones that what kind of leader you are bringing? What work has he done before? How has he before you choose? You just go and elect people like that. You don't care that this person is going to affect the rest of your life and the life, like Madam Ernest said. Legacies. You are going to be ancestors someday. What kind of legacies are we leaving behind? All of these things we keep talking about, we do not understand that each one of us are responsible for this keynote speaker. All of us, anything we do, directly or indirectly, we are going to be held accountable for that. And all this talk we are talking is not about talking it, it's about doing it. How much are we willing to do? How much are we going to leave our comfort zone to make sure that all of these things are put in place? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Okay. You know, before you say that, last year, the president approved some incentives for teachers in rural areas, and increased their retirement age to 65 and 40 years of service. But that will not stand immediately because the non-teaching staff are protesting. Those are not teachers in primary school, they are protesting that their age should be increased to 65. That is the problem of Nigeria. That pronouncement by the president will not take effect because these other people want their own too. So we have a big problem. We need to really understand what we want, as she has said. What do we want?
Okay, thank you very much. Madam, thank you for that emotional talk. Yeah, I think there's another dimension also when we talk about investment. You know, there's the private sector investment also in education. And for a country like ours, they are presently taking the space. Yeah, it's not just investing, but occupying the space. Because looking at it, the public schools are going down and continue to go down. And alternative becomes private schools. But the question is, you know, what is the quality, you know, of education coming out of that private investment? The motive for private investment is to make profits. That's fundamental. Nobody is investing where there will not be return. You know. Then secondly, you know, what's the impact on our society? You know, how many families, when you talk about everyday Nigerian, I'm not referring to the elites, you know, everyday Nigerians, how many families have that money, you know, to pay for their children, you know, in private schools, having one child, two children, 3 children, 4 children, you know, in one private school, primary school, secondary school, you know, depending on. pay up to ₦1 million, 600, where does that money comes from? And that is part of what is fueling corruption. Yeah, that money that public money meant to be invested, eventually becomes an outflow that supports, the children of elites, to take their children to school. So what I'm saying in effect is that the researches, we have is showing that this is taking its space and is as a result of the failure of the public school. And the resultant impact is the poverty is on the increase. It's creating social exclusion. Yeah, because it's no longer like before. Public school, remembering those days, nobody thinks about going abroad. Those that travel abroad are those that never do well. I remember my father tells this story, and you never want to go because you're doing it well, but unfortunately it has changed. So what it means is for us to devise really means, of holding government to account. We know that other entities, private entities invest, and other institutions, when we talk about NMPs, talk about CBN, talk about all those, that's not their core mandate. Yeah, the Ministry of Education has the mandate. And when we are talking about education, financing, that's the first point of call, whether at the state level, whether at the local government level, whether at the national level, So this area still become the major focus. Others are complementing, bridging the gap. Yeah, bridging the gap. But even at that, when you look at those private, the institutional investments and other multinationals, but they also try to invest. But the challenge we have with this group, when they build one thing, building a classroom block, how much that goes into their book, spending on that as part of corporate social responsibility. What it means is that it reduces the revenue. And when revenue goes down, the amount paid on tax also reduces. It's a strategy, and it's a strategy that's being tackled globally. Thank you.
A round of applause for the panel. Thank you very much. We have spent so much time here. We'll just jump to the plenary and have the mix of the panel and the plenary. If you're a student and you have something to say, can you just raise your hand? Okay. Okay, now what we're going to do now is we want solutions to these problems that is really, is it endemic now? We want solutions from all of us here. So if you want to say something, just raise your hand and we'll pass the mic to you. The panel is still here. If it is something they need to answer, they will, but we want solutions from you. What do you have to say regarding education financing in Nigeria? Okay, what is his name? Did you switch on the mic? If you raise your hand if you want to talk, so she can take, you can take number. Okay, just a minute, just a minute. So after you, okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So 10 is okay.
My name is Panshak Joshua. I stand on all the existing protocols. I'm one of the pupils of FCT School for the Blind Children, Jabi, here in Abuja. What I want to say pertaining this discussion of today is what I want to say is, I want the Nigerian government to understand there is that need for Nigerian government to understand that everybody has a purpose on earth. And education is one of the key for everybody to achieve his purpose on earth. So if the way for education cannot be easy to achieve purpose, then definitely so many people will continue, suffering will continue in Nigeria to the point that we'll live to regret it at the end. I want to talk especially in the side of people living with disability in Nigeria today, that Nigerian government needs to understand if there is high rate of numbers that will be given scholarship, let it be the class of these people. The reason why I say this is because, you know, persons living with disability, before you see somebody going to school, is a well-determined person. So please, Nigerian government need to understand. Look at the life of a person like somebody like Helen Keller. This Helen Keller must have been given a better care before she impacts life the way she does. So please, I want Nigerian government to come to this understanding and look at the numbers of special schools in Nigeria. Somebody like me, I'm coming right away from Plateau State. And the reason why I come from Plateau State is because the special schools are not around me. That's why. And this is one of the reasons. So imagine somebody that's blind coming from a different state. Is it that Nigerian government cannot be able to set up schools for these people?
Thank you very much. A round of applause for him. Number two, she has forgotten herself. Yes. Number two now is a girl here. You guys have a girl. Okay, so her name and where she's coming from.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Moses Joy. Moses Joy. He said he want to talk, he wants government. Good morning, everybody. You are welcome all. My name is Joy Moses from School for the Deaf, Kuje. Thank you all. I want to talk to you all on 3 reasons. That when governments build road and when government builds schools, they should make sure they have access road to that schools for security reasons. Then government should provide light for boarding school, also that one for security reasons. And then we want to suggest to government that they should please try to provide security for all the schools. So God will bless you all. Thank you. Thank you.
Number 3, briefly, your name and your organization. Very briefly, solution. You see, those 2 students are giving us solutions, isn't it, panel?
I'm still standing on the existing protocol. My name is Adeneke Oshabalade from GSS Jua. This beautiful program, and I'm really happy about this beautiful, but I'm sad on the other side because the people that they organize this program on their behalf, they are not here. Because if we talk from morning till night now, this message may not go to. That is why, that is my own.
We have a community to get to them. Thank you very much. Number 4.
Thank you so much. Let me start by thanking the organizers. I'm Greg Usubo from the African Development Bank. First of all, I would like to say that the education sector challenges are numerous. They've been enumerated here today. We talked about security, political will, teacher availability, management, gender disparity, and so many. But today we are focusing on education finance, which is also a big challenge. And my questions or contributions are going to be facing or looking at the education finance. I think the first thing to do is to actually identify the financing gaps, not just no teachers, in terms of figures. I'm talking about the finance in terms of figures. What are the financing gaps in the education sector in terms of maybe infrastructure? What is required to meet up with the infrastructural requirement between now and maybe 2030 or thereabout? What are the figures in terms of finance required for teaching, for learning, etc.? And also, these kind of portions have been held severally. You know, we have identified financing gaps. The question we should be asking ourselves are one, previous accommodations have been made in trying to address these financial gaps. What lessons can we learn? For example, what worked well? What did not work well? What needs to be done better? Are the policies going to work on the policies or they are okay? What do we need to refine? What in terms of strategy, coordination and management? These are the things we should actually be looking at in terms of financing. And maybe we should also answer it by looking at what financial models can we really be talking about in the education sector. And then also somebody mentioned, about the increasing debt, using our finances, the little finances the federal has, to pay debt. Question I have there is this: is it wrong to borrow? Is it wrong to borrow? What should be the challenges of borrowing? What should be our concern if we are to borrow? Money. What should we be doing? What should be our challenges?
Thank you very much. A round of applause for him. Please, we sent letters to the minister and other government functionaries, but they did not honor the invitation, even after following up. So, but however, a communique is being prepared. I will still be sent to them. Please, if you are asking a question or contributing, and what you are about to say has been discussed or said already, please just, but people say pipe low, just pipe low, so we can go forward. Number 5, please. Number 5.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Beatrice Lawrence. I'm representing Atachi Cultural Advocacy Initiative. First of all, I will stand on the existing and the established protocol and then proceed from here. I would like to say it's very, very sad that in the 21st century that we are currently discussing education at the level at which we're discussing it right now as a country. Looking at the world right now that have been affected by global change and global shift, we're still talking about education as if it's still the 1960s, when the world have moved away from just teaching people to teaching people not just how to use their hands, how to use their head, and also how to use their minds. Education now in China is now in 3 levels. They train people on how to use their head, train people on how to use their hands, and also train people how to use their mind, depending on whichever level that you're good at. Now, I would like to just shift a little from what I've been said, going by what the MC said, that we shouldn't mention anything that I've been mentioned. I noticed that in the report that Dr. Abraham had actually given, and all the previous reports I've been reading, and the budget relating to Nigerian education and financing, I noticed that knowledge and research are not even given priorities. And we know that knowledge and research are the 2 critical pillars of education, and these are the areas that ought to be funded and financed. However, we seem to lay more emphasis on contracts of buildings, equipment, trainings, events, remuneration, and while research institutes stay isolated from all of this. A recent check have revealed that 20 largest spenders on research and development are the largest economies of the world. Can we get there without funding and financing knowledge, development, and research? So first of all, there's the issue of right funding. And then also there's the issue of financing of education. This is not even about the budget or the procurement. What needs to be funded? I asked myself while I was coming here, and I said research. There are global funds for research, but we are currently that we can only attract them if we take research seriously and not just contracts. So source of funding, globally and locally, we can exploit and attract them simply by resettling our priorities and showing more accountabilities for the ones that we've received so far, just like Amza would say. The implication of the misapplication of funds is so huge and endemic. So the way forward that I would suggest and recommend is that we adopt the public-private partnership model to fund private for contracts, which goes into the infrastructure and fund and all of that, and then the government's funds are made available for enabling knowledge and research.
Thank you very much. A round of applause. Thank you very much. Number 7 or 6 now. You have a lot of lecturers here.
Don't allow me to raise my name.
Dr. Tifa, you have a lot of lecturers
From
here.
FCT Universal Basic Education Board. What protocol did you observe? While Dr. Tifa was presenting, from the presentation, salary was not captured. So we don't know whether from the budget, salary is part of the budget that he was analyzing. Because from the budget, it was just about the structure, the capital project, but we don't know whether in the budget, salary is part of the budget. And then it's recurrent. Then secondly, there is job satisfaction among teachers, and that was not discussed. Now, aside from the project and the pupils in the school, I want to focus more on job satisfaction among the teachers in the field. Now, from the training ground, we discovered that the system of education now in Nigeria is just to cram and pass. Now, when these teachers come out from school, they cannot impact the students. Now, these students now are left behind with half knowledge. And then most of the teachers who pick up this job, they just pick up the job just to earn a living. Now, they are not satisfied because their salaries are being delayed and not being paid. NUT should look into that. Because NUT is one of the civil society that should fight for teachers. Now, if you look at in teaching, promotion comes faster because there is no competition in that sector. So you can be promoted the rank of deputy director or a director in school and nothing to show after retirement. Now, that alone can cause a lot of damage to job satisfaction among the teachers. Now, you see, and secondly, my brother was talking about the 21st century of education. Now, in this 21st century of education, while one of the panel was talking about the gap between the poor and the rich, we saw it in during COVID. Now, in this 21st century, even the teachers are not trained on how to use part of this modern ICT. They cannot even use it for the rural areas to even impart the students. They don't even know how to even use the laptops to do what our technicals are doing now to present this in the classroom. So how do you expect them now to handle most of these things now to teach the students in the classroom? Now the training has to go back to the foundation from the NC, those who are training the trainees in the field, so that they can build our qualified teachers so that when they come out, they can deliver. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Our Muslim brothers stand for prayers, and we'll have to round up this session now. Except if you promise me you will take 45 seconds. So that's 45 seconds times 4. That is 3 minutes, Abby. 45 seconds briskly.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Mrs. Esther from Invest. I don't have much to say, but just to say that education is the only investment we can give to our children. And we can see that government now cannot be able to fund the school as they ought to. And I'm saying that I just want to give suggestions that in our schools, we have what is called internal generating activities. In some primary schools, you see that there is one of our schools that produces chalk. And we have those that have agriculture in their various schools. There are things schools can do that can generate money for that school so that the school can keep on going. And you discover that whatever we do to our children is just education. In future, no matter what maybe properties you keep down for your children, it will not work. They will grow, and in the end, they will not use it. It will be useless. But then they will tell you they don't need it. Keeping things for their children, even for the children yet unborn. With this, and also if they can pay 1% of what they are generating in Nigeria to education, I think it will go a long way.
Thank you. That's already going to debt fund. Debt fund collects 2%. Okay. Debt fund collects 2% of consolidated revenue.
Good afternoon, all. I'm Mrs. Pam, the Council of Nigeria. Of all the discussions we have had, I have not heard anybody from Federal Ministry of Education. And I know in 2009, there was this committee on financing education that was approved by the president, and I was part of that committee. I want to recommend that the decisions and the recommendations from that committee be incorporated into the communique of this group, because they are in detailed and talking about the 2% of debt fund, recommending it to 4%, and the 5% of UBEC have also been reviewed. So there are beautiful recommendations from the presidential tax team of 2019. Further to that, there is Rethinking Education Committee that have been set with beautiful recommendations on that. The third one, under the JCCMC process of the Federal Ministry of Education, under the program, they have also had decisions of the National Council of Education. I was thinking this committee will be working with the Federal Ministry of Education directly and making those in the recommendations and implement. We will not be having roundtables for discussions, rather implementation. I would be happy seeing all those recommendations and decisions that were made under these three umbrellas of the committee I have talked about for implementation.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. So, how many more people do you have? 9 and 10.
This is the last one.
10. 9 and 10 only. You didn't raise your hand.
I don't know. Don't listen. My name is Pastor J.G. Aladi. I'm the president of Original Inhabitants Development Association, OIDA. I have two things. One, curriculum. Two, education database. The presenter, thank you for that wonderful paper. You are saying that if you send somebody to go and buy meat, you want to see how much, whether the money is commensurate with that thing. Why is it possible that what is happening to Nigerian education, that the curriculum that is used for teaching our primary, secondary, university, who sees it anywhere? Is it hidden? Why is it hidden? I don't know why we hide our curriculum so that people will know what is on ground. I'm talking from FCT. Primary school curriculum in FCT have 6 languages: English, Arabic, Hausa, Igbo, French, then English is said, then to that too. That because it's a central country, then everybody should The child must get it. Is that education? So let's have the curriculum. Everybody, let it be everywhere. In there. Everybody should know. Because if the curriculum is fine, people will pay now.
Thank you very much.
Number two, database. That education database is needed. Maybe to be done in the 36 states because we don't really know the level of literacy level in our communities.
Thank you very much. We appreciate it. A round of applause. Very briefly.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ayetipo. I'm from Government Secondary School, Kuje. Now, today, Nigerian out-of-school children is 10.5 million. Now, my suggestion is easy. What if the Nigerian government were borrowing money from other countries? What if Nigerian government invests more in education, such that we'll have more schools built in the local areas as the rural areas? Now, more students will be able to go to school. Talking of Sokoto State, Zamfara, and even Gombe State, most of these northern states, more schools should be built in this area so that more students will be able to go to school. And again, secondly, to talk about quality education, teachers should be trained. There should be a way that teachers it will build an orientation for teachers, such that teachers will be equipped with the necessary knowledge, because you can't give what you don't have.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. A round of applause for him.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Modibe Elijah from Government Secondary School, Babalada. It's no more news to us that even in Nigeria, we sell jobs. And I wonder why it's going to happen even in the educational center. Because if I know many people that are not even qualified to be teachers, but since they have that money, they pay them in to become teachers. What is our future? What are you giving us? And another thing I'm going to say is that rural areas, they will ever continue to be called rural areas because nobody is going to invest there to make people out from that place, to make leaders to develop that area. People living in the bush, they are not to be called wild animals. You can train them. When you don't train the male child, they are going to turn out to become cows tomorrow. So I don't know the way we can help the government and us to helping them. By all means, going to the rural areas and seeing that education becomes something there, because education helps leaders come up. So there are potentials there living inside that we can generate. We can bring great minds out from there to help the rural areas grow. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. A round of applause for him. Did you hear what he said? People are buying job. People are buying job. You want to be teacher, you pay.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Faith Okunorugo from Change Managers International Network. I will digress a little bit, but it's still based on financing. The national coordinator for Secretary mentioned that quality is what we should be looking at in education, not just the quantity. And over the years, we see that the quality of education seems to be reducing, most especially in the north. The solution, one of the solutions we can actually bring about to sustain education is that of security in the north. See, if we look all over the world, we notice that women have played a large role in ensuring security in places like Rwanda, in places like in Sierra Leone and so many other countries. So I would advise that we begin to build a culture of respect for women, of taking the decisions of women seriously.
Thank you very much.
Sorry, please let me.
Thank you very much. If we remain here for 2 days, we'll keep talking.
I know.
For 2 days.
But we need security.
We'll give the panel.
Let me finish, please. We need security in this nation. And it's not just about gender activism, but if we start having women raise up and they can speak in their homes, and their mothers can talk to the sons and they listen, and the wives can talk to their husbands and they listen, then we are going to have better security in the system, and we'll have children stay in school, not being pulled out of school because they are being kidnapped or being killed. Thank you very much.
Any last? Okay, we have one more last before I give the panel to make their submissions. Hilda Dokubo has 30 seconds to make her contribution before the submission. So I'll start with the Queen. After Hilda Dokubo, you have 30 seconds.
My suggestions are very simple. The people who sit to vote for anything, having said, my suggestion is simple. 2023 is very close. Anybody who wants to ask, serve us in a capacity. If your child, grandchild, whatever, has not or is not presently in any public school, you cannot be allowed to take your form. Because except you have something at stake, whatever is not paid for is considered trivial. So let that be the signal. You must children to serve the public. The second way to raise this money, because if we want to achieve SDG, we didn't achieve MDG4. We need to achieve MDG4. The second one is, out of all the excesses that we have from everywhere, they should take out deliberately and put it in education and direct that money to informal education. The reason is today, more people make money as their algorithm people, more people influencers, more people make money as fashion designers, more people make money as filmmakers, as us, as sports people. So let's put that money there, just like that you live in the bush does not mean you're an animal.
Thank you very much. So if you don't have anybody in public school, we will not vote for you. Even if it's your in-law or your cousin. Or you finish giving back to grandchildren.
Thank you, Maria. You've said a lot. You've said most of what I wanted to say. Governors, like, your children are meant to be in this country, because if they're not in this country, you won't put your efforts to making the country great. If your child is not in a public school, you won't put your effort to make that public school better, because you know that none of your blood or your family is there. You don't really care about other people, even if it's not meant to say people are selfish in nature. We have to start somewhere. Rome did not grow in a day. We have to have more freedom to speak what we want to say. Women should be given more opportunities. We should start somewhere. As Madam has said, the police.
Good afternoon again. So we were talking about budget financing, right?
Yes.
Have a question.
So you are making submissions, solutions, recommendations.
Okay. So the first solution, a lot of people talked about it, but they did not hamper it. The CSR policies that can engage more multinationals. We need to engage more multinationals and get them to be part of the educational engagement that we're talking about. They should commit and they should invest in education. When COVID-19 came last year, the federal government made it the point of emergency. Education today, from today, let's make it a point of emergency for everybody to know that they need to have a stake in it. They need to be part of it. And when engaging organizations like multinationals, for the telecoms, like Dr. Murtala talked about, their corporate social responsibility should be dedicated to education, like launching an online educational platform that will be free, completely free for government to also collaborate and partner with. Then you factor in all of those schools. How many public schools do you want to? Maybe we have MTN in Abuja, then we have NTL, we have all of these telecommunications. How many schools do you want to? As your CSR, let it be part of the policy makers' responsibility to ensure that they do that. Adequate planning. Somebody was talking about children per ratio to teachers. We need to be very, very intentional about this planning. The planning that we did not do 20 years ago is what is biting us in the butt right now. That we are having insecurities everywhere in Nigeria. Not only in the north, we have insecurities everywhere. But the planning that we did not do about education, we need to know, like what one of the plenary said, we need to know how many secondary schools we have. How many more do we need? We need to know how many teachers we need. We've been bagging the world about 200 million Nigerians. And we know that everybody knows that we have like 46% of the total population is about 46%. Let's sit down, let's be serious about this thing. Let's have an action plan. That, okay, we have these, that numbers. How many do we need in the year, in the next 10, 20, let's be intentional about this thing. In the next 10, 20 years, how many toilets do we need? That's as simple as that. How many furnitures do we need to take care of these children? I went to a Unity School, Federal Government Girls College, Bida. In my set, we're celebrating our 30th anniversary. We're thinking of what projects we are going to do. And I've seen so many of my schoolmates, different sets setting up different projects in the school. Let's get everybody that went to Unity School that enjoyed what we enjoyed, engage, pay, and give back to the school that made them who they are now. It should be part of the policies. I don't know how they're going to do. Then the third thing is about research. I'm going to say something very controversial right now. Mr. Anzak said something about the learning outcome of our children, that it should be measured. The learning outcome, I'm sorry about this, but I feel that the government is about time the government hold the university professors accountable for not bringing out, doling out the required number of researchers that we need in this country to grow this country. I feel that all these monies that the government has been paying them, how many people have given us breakthroughs in Nigeria? And if there are, how much have they supported? Because in other developed countries, when you have breakthroughs, is it not Nigerians that built the best car? Is it Chevrolet, or what's the name of the car? Why do Nigerians strive abroad more than this? These are questions we need to be asking ourselves. Research, like the other guy talked about, research must be put as a priority in this country. We need to start holding teachers accountable. Are they doing what they're supposed to be doing? Because this me syndrome of Nigeria is really getting old. And we need to shift from thinking about ourselves. We need to shift about understanding that every child that you as a teacher train, the result of that child comes back to you into the society. It's not about you. We need to redefine what services means in Nigeria. It's not enough for you, as from the security man up to the top person should understand what responsibility is about in service. It's not just about you, it's bigger than you. Whatever you do directly or indirectly, it comes back to you. We all need to hold ourselves accountable. And then finally, the incentives again for teachers, the local government area issues that we talked about earlier on. When we have local government, the best schools at the local government areas, we wouldn't have the overpopulation that we have in Port Harcourt, Lagos, and all of that. When we know that, aside from infrastructure, we are having the best teachers. When we know that we have all of the best teachers, all the policies are being put in place and the systems and processes are structured in for the local government area. And we know that the power of public schools is important to everybody. I think that private school will be out of business. I remember that in my time, if you're going to private school, they think that you don't know enough. It's only when you're going to federal government colleges, that's when they know, or government colleges, that's when they know that you're intelligent. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I just want to keep strictly to the theme of this conversation, which is education financing. And I hope that people drafting the communique will also try and tease out the specific education financing issues, because there are a lot of things to discuss on education. There's a lot to talk on education, but specifically when I was invited here is to discuss education financing. And that's the key thing we need to focus on. For me, there are a lot we need to do. Yes, it is true, like Celeste mentioned, the Ministry of Education does its sole responsibility to manage resources and ensure quality and systems around education. But there are a lot of other institutions outside the control of the ministry that are investing in education, state, national, and national level. What do we get the ministry to do? Number one is to set up a design, a structure, policy framework that ensure that all investment in education goes through the ministry. Even if the money is not going to hit the ministry's account, we are clear that this particular amount of resources is reflected in the Ministry of Education. That's very important because it allows us to track it. If the central bank has resources and we say they want to do corporate securities, because central bank is a public institution, it's not MTN. NNPC is a public institution. It is not MTN or bank or Zenith Bank or First Bank. So if they are going to put anything on education, let it go through the right channel and get it properly documented. Number two is that, look, we need to have a different mechanism for budgeting for education. We need to be very clear. This omnibus structure of ministry and lump sum and like some of the things that the researcher tried to describe, we are going to rehabilitate 5 secondary schools. And I really think that we may adopt a per capita budget basis for school, where we'll say, look, as a country, for us to get the desired learning outcome, we think we need to spend so amount of money on each pupil of a primary school or of secondary school. And therefore, we can say that because we are going to spend 100,000 on every child in primary school for 2021, then we multiply that by the number of pupils that we have in primary school for the whole country or secondary school, and then define what we actually need for education budget. That allows us to target, that allows us to know where the funding gap is located. Because if we have 50 million pupils or students of secondary school, we can say that 50 million times 200,000 that we want to spend, and then we define how much we need. So if the government decides to budget separately something less than that, we knew there's a funding gap. So per capita budgeting is one. This is what is being done in many parts of the world, and we need to adopt that. Number 3 for me is decentralization of resource allocation. Can we have a system where we resource our schools directly. We resource our schools directly. If you want to learn the impact of resourcing school directly, think about private schools. Whatever money generated in private schools are largely spent in those schools. So if we have that model for our public schools, and we say that each public school of social number of pupils will require social amount of money per annum, and then we budget, and then we set up proper accountability system to ensure that these resources are properly utilized. In fact, the schools can even arrange to train its own teachers, that they will not necessarily rely on Ministry of Education to train teachers. Nobody is doing that again. Ministry of Education in Abuja is very, very far from where she went to, where Federal Government College Bidda. It's very far. So can we have that system where there is that direct budgeting, and then schools have human resource development bodies? We need that. All you have in schools are not just basically teachers. You also have professionals who are supporting that human resource development in schools. So there's a lot we can do to strengthen our education financing in the country. We need to streamline that. Education tax. I also think we need to broaden education tax so that will come in beyond what is going to TED fund. At the moment, you cannot take TED fund away from universities and polytechnics, because the TED fund is a product of university people. It was ASU that was challenged by Wagira's government, and ASU decided to initiate education tax as a way of funding university. It was later that it also went down to fund other tertiary institutions. So we can't take that away, otherwise we'll be calling for a big fight with ASU and others. But if we broaden the people or institutions that are paying education tax, we can take a percentage and invest and get to also support other layers of education. For me, that will help in properly financing education in the country. I think agencies like ours, need special component, whether it's 5 is 20%, this 10%, we need them for advocacy. But for those of us who are involved in this work, we know that they are actually not workable. For instance, ActionAid works. Let me take some ActionAid 3 sector. For instance, hey, we already have the Abuja Declaration, is 10%. On it, only HIV/AIDS. And we have Mobutu Declaration, which is about 15%, if I'm not mistaken. 10%. You have Mobutu Declaration, 10%. So you have UNESCO commitments to education that we've all also made, which is so about 25%. 26%, sorry, yeah, which is 26%. So if you just take these 3 sectors, just 3 alone, you're already hitting 50%. So it is challenging, and it's allowing government to probably raise some of this gap. I think the percentage allocation for education, we can define it very specific. In Nigeria, we can actually say that 26% UNESCO is not workable, because crisis is actually deeper than UNESCO stands, and in the 50% of government projects to actually go to education. I think for me, this is how we own it. So probably maybe one of these actually will be hosted. They need much more extensive debate on financing, and then we'll come back with a resolution and say for Nigeria, this is the percentage that we need for us to actually be able to strengthen our education at state, local government, and at state level. Use that for our advocacy. Maybe next year, if we are marking the day, this is what we should be thinking about. Thank you very much.
Let me add my voice to the part of the solution. I think there's need for constitutional framework there's need for constitutional framework. Just like the anchor person reminded us about the incentives that the federal government in 2018 what teachers did. Say there are a lot of incentives and a lot of them. But currently, there is a concurrent list, and as such, that the federal government cannot dictate to them what they will do to their teachers. And then lies the problem. That's the constitutional gap. So my concern is that some of the invited guests who actually come from the National Assembly or in their representative capacity, they are no more here. I would have wished they are here so that they will take this information to the National Assembly. Let there be a constitutional framework to strengthen this particular issue, because when it comes to the actual implementation, the governors or the government chairman will tell you that education is in a concurrent list. That they choose to whatever they will offer. That's that one. Again, you cannot do budgeting. There should be inclusive budgeting. Children with disability, who are the beneficiaries of the budget? Yes, pupils. These are the key beneficiaries of all this budget. Not just come at the end of the day, you just gather from the Federal Ministry of Education, bring your at the end of the day, put one or two record figures. At the end of the day, it will not be effective. Before all this budgeting, let these key players be put into consideration. And finally, I want to recommend that follow the money. The NUT is position is that they should follow the money. Let the civil society, with the help of Action Aid, I so much recommend Action Aid. They have been there, and I wouldn't see them being tired. Let them continue to champion this cause for just this reason, which they could read. Let the civil society, through a steering committee, follow this budget implementation to the core. Otherwise, because if we leave it to the National Assembly and the rest of them who have this mandate of actually going for this, I don't think this particular challenge will continue to occur. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll just continue. The question from the AFTV is around. Oh, great, I want to talk to you directly. As you raised that question, it really hits me because you were very concerned about working out the quantum of finance gap. So I know I'm from the economics and mathematical field. So we need some kind of model to do that. When you begin with a benchmark, for instance, you start with the UNESCO 26%, you come down to SDG framework of 15 to 20%. Then, you know, I said in my presentation that the current minister, Adamu, December 2017, refuted all those possibilities the way Dr. Hussein Abdu has also made it clear that for them, when you add all those percentages, it becomes too big. The minister himself said that what is required to finance Nigeria's education to make it really good is 1 trillion naira. So for us who model, who work with maths, you use that as a benchmark. So 1 trillion naira, this current 2021 budget is 776 billion. The share of capital is, I'll be very precise, capital budget in it is 156.17 billion. So 1 trillion minus 156.17 billion. The current gap for education financing is 843 billion annually, according to the minister's narrative modeling. You know how we do these things in academics. So if I'm to put this to the media, that's it. Based on what, because the minister represents the current administration. By their own standard, we have a gap of 843 billion for capital. And the current capital is 156, so you can work out that percentage. Then if I work that as a ratio, find the value of X, of what percentage of the current 156 is represented in UNESCO's recommendation and SDG 4, then we can work out and start converting to dollars having adjusted for inflation. This is how we do it when modeling financially. So that's the context. Then to take off from yours again, Dr. Hussein Abdu has been in development field for long. I'm following his work from action aid to plan to currently care. So what he's saying is extremely perfect. But discussion changes as per your audience. I think its level of discussion should be with the president and Federal Executive Council. There's need for an African ECOWAS national framework for education financing. But by engaging with ministers, if you are not direct, you will just miss the talk. You must engage them in the manner of, in this your budget, we saw this. What we want is this. So that they will know what to do. You know, economics work based on this demand and supply model. Everything you see in demand is human interest represented, selfishly, like the lady rightly said. As civil society people, we are on the demand side of the demand and supply curve. Government is supply. When demand and supply meet, there's a price. So when you are engaging, what is your price? What do you want? We want more education for women and girls. Say it. Because at that level, once you say it, your price meets with their own and they tell you what's possible. But before you make that demand, like his Oga rightly said, what we should be putting again, one thing we can take home from this convention, from this seminar, is that based on deliberation by the panelists and the audience, there is need for a bill for an act for a coordinated framework for education financing. Actually, you should package this and send to the legislators. A need for a bill for an act for a coordinated framework for education financing. The objective of the bill is that CBN finances, NFPC finances, clause 1, paragraph 1, all contribution for education should go to Ministry of Education, which will be administered as follows. That's how they write us. So at this level, we are not classroom direct lecturers. We've worked in this development field. Our hands are dirty digging data. So what we are saying is direct. So this is what the National Assembly we need to do. I think that a bill for an act for a coordinated framework for education financing in Nigeria. And take note, that's actually a talking anyway, not one of us, but that's actually a recommendation. Then lastly, on the side, you were right when you talked about the current salary part. The way the budget is structured, there is capital and there's recurring. Recurring is now personnel and overhead. All your salaries is under personnel. Personnel is administered using very special accounting framework. All these IPPIS and KISBs and things like that, personnel, salary, overhead, that's where ghost workers and the rest come in. So, but the way it works is that it will be determined by the administration of your school. So they sum up and sum up and sum up. They will work out promotions and things like that for the next year before they make up the next year's budget. So what's important in that direction is to address what the young lad from the school said. All this idea of paying for job, all those things should stop. Promotion based on favoritism should stop. There should be salaries and remuneration, if I may, should be made to be more tributary composed. Don't just say teacher salary is 10 naira. Make it clear. Housing allowance, upkeep allowance. The way their own is, I know who I mean by their own. It should be very clear, not teacher salary, 80,000. Work it out in terms of house rent, the thing has collapsed. So that's what it is. But in terms of project, the capital project component is what drives generally the way financing works. Then I think I can go on and on, but I think that's just what I want to say in terms of recommendation. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, Dr. Tefa, thank you very much. Okay, I will also start with the question you raised. We are very brief in terms of what is wrong in. Yeah, I don't think there's anything wrong in borrowing. Yeah, borrowing is part of our life. CBN 2 weeks ago said that borrowing is not a sin. Yeah, but the question is what you borrow. What did you use it for? Yeah, between 2015 and now, first quarter 2021, we've borrowed 23 trillion. Yeah, over 6 years. That's excluding $1.5 billion approved last week, plus $986 million for agri mechanization.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So there's nothing wrong, but the question is, what is it being used for? Then, in terms of, are you stopping me? Okay, another question. Yeah. Just said it. Yeah. That's another. Okay, there's another one now. Okay, so the figure I mentioned from last that of last week approval is different from the regular one as I mentioned. You go to DMO website, it's there. It's not fabricated. Yeah. So the question is, what are you using it for? 23 billion over 5-6 years, and where poverty is on the increase. You know, inequality is on increase. People are getting out of school, insecurity and all that. So what it means is that we need to recheck our pattern of expenditure. And talking about education financing, the pattern of our budget cannot and will not be able to finance and sustain our education. Yeah, we have incremental budgetary process. As he showed, you see how it's moving. Last year 10, this year 13.6. Maybe next year we might be chasing 15 trillion. Yeah, so it keeps moving, and it's just a conduit pipe. Every year, ministries have templates like this, my book. You sit down and fill it and go and defend it at the budget office, from there to the National Assembly. Who determines what? Who determines what the priority is? It's not me, it's not you, it's not the parents. It's the people sitting around that table deciding where that money goes, and that money goes where it benefits them. So it's not even about 5.68% for education, but the utilization of that money. What was it utilized? Yeah, moving around is just all about the current expenditure. We shouldn't continue in that pattern of development. And the institutions are weak. The oversight is very weak. If you put up $10 billion out there for education, it will still go down the drain because there's no strengthened oversight following that money to see if actually that money was expended on what is meant for. Thank you. Let me think, not that much.
Thank you very much. We've had impactful. I'm sure everybody is happy here. And we are going to repent and repair. We are going to repent and repair. Dr. Abdul is off. Okay. So the country director, Action Aid, will say a big thank you to the panel and say one or two things before they communicate, present their document.
Thank you very much. I say a big thank you to colleagues, to the researcher and also distinguished colleagues for the work they have been able to do, to Sakefa, NUT, and the entire team. And from members of the parliament that came on board as well. We are happy that African Development Bank is also here with us, and for the distinguished people that are here. I don't want us to leave here so gloomy, because all hope is not lost. I do understand the borrowing that we are talking about. I'm really wounded by the borrowing, because the borrowing that they are borrowing right now has moratorium. That means those who are in government that are borrowing are not the ones that are going to pay back. Can you imagine borrowing for your children to pay? And then we don't know what they are doing with that money. We know what borrowing, during the debt that they talked about was, I think about $4 billion that was borrowed by Obasanjo, that Nigeria suffered so much for. It was borrowed in 1978. What he did with the money, we still don't have the explanation up to today, and we were all owing. Now Nigeria has about 83, before the one they are just approving now, about $83 billion that they are owing. Externally, they are owing about 33 billion. But internally, that you need to release even the funding for the local economy, we are owing so much money. But I want to just let you know that the federal government colleges have some of the best teachers. The unity colleges and the government colleges, they have some of the best teachers. And I experienced it personally, because my son, I took a job outside the country, and I went with my son. He was in an international, school, the secondary school that he attended. But we came back to Nigeria. He did IGCSE. But when he did that, that's the whole level that they had the opportunity to write. His subject combination was not okay. And I felt there was something wrong with the foundation. I took him to a government college, Gawu. If you look at the environment, there are 2 beautiful hostels that were built, but they're locked up because the contractors have not been paid by the Ministry of Education. And throughout his time, he was looking, we stayed there and you are looking at the buildings, but they are not open to students. These are some of the things. So let's look at the issues of corruption. While we are looking at financing, we need to look at that.
But I can tell you, my son could not believe that I was leaving him behind in that school because of the privileges that he has had in the past. I said, these are human beings, they are like you. You are going to sit there. In that senior secondary school, they had about 58 teachers. And you know, when they are employing people in the government colleges, you have to be qualified from education. And that is one thing that is solid. So can we improve these schools? If you improve those schools, nobody will be in the private school. And the Rwanda example, I think, is something that they can do. And my boy came out, he was having problem in chemistry, I think physics also, but this boy came out with all A's in sciences. So whichever area he wanted to go, these were teachers. They are grooming, but their facilities are very poor. Even with the facilities, we need to think about the teachers, how they are graduating these students. They are squeezing themselves. The laboratories are not equipped in most of the schools. So we can do better with what we're doing. I'm just saying that it is not all blooming. So we don't go away thinking that, it's okay. Rwanda invested heavily on education. Very soon you will see Nigerians who are going to Rwanda for education. But Rwanda invested so heavily that many teachers, many of the private schools are closing down. That's what is happening. So education is the best investment, is the most important investment that you can do for a nation. Those who are coming from, government secondary school, I can tell you they can compete with anywhere around the world. And so all is not lost, but it's a roll call. It's a roll call that we recommit ourselves. If you don't leave the stage better than you met it, you are a failure. And so if it did good for you, like our sister was mentioning here, if we are the political class, if you are not able to leave the stage better, then we are failures of a generation. The generational failure, we have to be able to hold ourselves accountable. But civil society organizations, we need to ask questions. We need to hold the government to account. They have to be held accountable. The present debt servicing that we are doing now is not sustainable. What are they borrowing for? And we have to follow the money. I want to thank you for your patience with us. Our Muslim sisters and brothers really apologize for the delay. And we just want to thank the MC as well for good MC, and each and every one of you, those who came from other states. We wish you journey mercy back home. We must not forget the issue of conflict that is going on. It's very sad that our girls are being taken from schools. Boys and girls are being taken from school. The kidnapping, the government of Nigeria must wake up to the insecurity level. Where you bless even the security chiefs that were not responsible, and you bless them with a seat of ambassadorial seat, it is shocking. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam. With the permission of the Action Aid Country Director, I want to thank our keynote speaker. I want to thank our keynote speaker and tell everybody that she's from a government school, and did she do well? She performed excellently well. Thank you. Actually, they have a package for you. I don't know what they have, but they have a package for you because you presented the government school very well. So we'll have the communique read now, and picture. I think she did very well, our keynote speaker. I will invite her next week for another event. She come and represent the minister. That she did well. So those of us that think are not good, see example. So photograph, you say photograph, where? We've taken photograph before. Did you join us? Did you join us earlier? In photograph. Okay. So the communique committee, are you ready? Communique committee, are you ready?
Yes, ready.
Are you ready? Communique committee, are you ready? Daniel, are you guys ready? The communique, is it ready? Okay, the communique is ready. We'll take a listen. They said they cannot project it. So, hello.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much for your time and for waiting. It's been a great time of discussion. So a communique issued at one-day national dialogue on education and financing by Action Aid and Civil Society Action Coalition on Education for All, as a KEFA, held Thursday, 29th April 2021 at the National Dialogue Hall, second floor, Federal Ministry of Education, Abuja. The theme is more and better financing of education in Nigeria. Introduction to the National Dialogue. Action Aid, in collaboration with SEKEFA and NUT, organized a one-day National Dialogue on Education for All. The National Dialogue, which had 80 participants in attendance, and providing platform for CSO to further strengthen their capacity and their roles in supporting delivery of education programs in their various states, as well as providing opportunity for government to commit to proper financing of efficient and effective education programs and projects in Nigeria. The one-day dialogue brought together stakeholders from some states of the Federation, including CSOs, international and local partners, school students, teachers, parliamentarian, media, and the web, and also others representing different government agencies. The objective of this dialogue is to harness the thoughts and position civil society and citizens play on education financing, on the financing of education rather. It also aims to raise awareness on the need for education financing in Nigeria so as to cope the very many challenges in that sector. In National Dialogue proceedings, National Dialogue entertained welcome address from the Director of Action Aid Nigeria, goodwill messages from international development partners and government ministries, departments, and other agencies. All of the observations from this dialogue. In the course of the deliberation and the plenary, the sessions, issues around thematic areas of discussion were highlighted and include the following. Low funding. The discussion noted and observed that education has been poorly funded over the years, and the education budget has been on the decrease from 10% in 2019 to about 5% in 2021. The federal government's budget has been on the increase or a decrease in the education budgets. 2, underutilization of education tax. 3, tax holidays for the multinational. Lack of implementation of recommendation of education financing declaration by the President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria from 2% to 4% of the third fund. 5, poor infrastructures in school, and this has over time prevented students, especially girls, from going to school, thereby increasing the number of out-of-school children. Insecurity and lack of inclusive and safe school initiatives. 7, the lack of political will of the federal and state government to implement education replenishment funds. The education sector is poorly funded. The 2020 allocation to education is still below the replenishment pledge by the federal government in 2018 at Dakar, Senegal, where the federal government pledged to 30% of annual budget on education. 8, uncoordinated and centralized education data. Adequate data in Nigeria is a challenge to planning and implementing education policies and programs in Nigeria. And to a very large extent, this data challenge is resulting to reporting estimated high number of out-of-school children in Nigeria. 9, we also have the lack of social accountability mechanism. There is no social accountability mechanism in place for effective civil society citizens' participation. 10, increased budgetary allocation on global standards for education and all-inclusive gender-based education for all, a system of education that both monitors and measures reports, a public-private partnership on education financing should be strengthened. 14, increased security challenge. These are the observations within and around the school. And then they also observe keenly that about the absence of the Minister of Education or his representative at this dialogue. What are the issues? We have 2 key issues that we've noted. Stable and declining and weak in real terms, even worse in terms of actual representation. 2, the education financing falls below global expectation, including SDG 4 framework, hence unlikely to deliver on the SDGs if the current trend persists. What are our resolutions and recommendations from this dialogue? In light of the observations stated above, the national dialogue comprising of stakeholders has thereby presented the following resolutions and recommendations. That's 1, governments must increase investment in education. This way we can reduce criminality and security challenges we are seeing in the country at the moment. Secondly, we must invest in the teacher workforce, as this is critical to the delivery of SDG 4, which is education for all. 3, continue to embed inclusive education into policy planning, budgeting, and monitoring by strengthening sharing of good practice and experiences across states to support federal inclusive education policy. 4, that the government should raise significant new funds for education to transform both education systems. This can be in the way of increasing the share of budget to start moving towards, forward rather than backward. The international standard of 20% education budget allocated to the education sector, has to be looked into. 5, achieving the SDG 4 goal will require huge boost in overall spending, and Nigeria must urgently raise new revenues to meet SDG 4. 6, government should enable greater security of future allocation and expenditure by publicly publishing education budgets and their spendings. 7, broadening education tax, more tax revenue for education from sectors that will not have adverse effects on the poor should be strongly considered. 8, the federal government and all the parastatals should invest in education, both in quality, in access, not just in budgeting, but also in the releases of those funds. There is need for increased political will of the political leaders to ensure that education is well funded from the local level to the national level. 10, education should be declared a state of emergency in Nigeria. 11, multinationals should be effectively taxed 1% of their annual profits to be committed to the education, especially teachers' training and continuous development. 12, the civil society organizations should engage more with the multinational to increase their corporate social responsibilities on education development. 13, there's need for government to design a policy framework to ensure that all resources reflecting in the Ministry of Education and from all its donors. 14, a different mechanism should be set up for education budgeting, thereby helping government to adopt a per capita budget for schools and the decentralization of budget allocation. This will enable proper accountability of the education projects. Action Aid and SACEFA and the NUT should design a bill for an act for education financing to the National Assembly. In conclusion, participants at the one-day National Dialogue Education Financing commended the organizers, Action Aid Nigeria, SACEFA, and NUT for this great initiative to bring stakeholders to a roundtable to discuss education financing in commemoration of the Global Action Week. We also thank all the participants who attended for contributing and making input during the national dialogue. Your thoughts and ideas has been rich the dialogue documents. We must appreciate the presence of students, head of schools, CS schools, and media, and other stakeholders. Your presence in promoting Action Aid, SECEFA, and NUT to continue to do more and lead to more and more conversation. So this is a community team by Dr. Ezi, Beyond Mentors, Ebukede, presenting SECEFA under Save the Boys Initiative, and then Randy Matthew from CBN. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much. What did you hear in the community that you don't like? They say the government people are not here. Do you think we should remain or should expunge it? Because you're going to send the communique to them, and they'll feel maybe slighted if they see that you wrote in bold that they were not here. After all, TRCN was here, and their government. So, thank you very much. The photo from
Thank you very much. I really appreciate your tenacity. Most of the people on the high table, as you know, usually don't stay to the end of the program. Therefore, we whenever have an opportunity to do a thanks, word of thanks, I know that the people I'll be thanking are the most important in the room. We really appreciate your contributions. We appreciate your patience, and we thank you for your contributions. We pray that we will walk the talk. And even as members of civil society, we need to up our game. Those things that we point fingers at to those in government, we shouldn't be found doing them. Therefore, as civil society practitioners, we will up our game. We will see that we contribute more to the growth and development of the society. Once again, thank you very much. May the Lord take you back to your various destinations, and especially our students. Hello, our students here. Can we see your hands? Yes, wave your hands. Thank you very much for coming. We really appreciate you, and thank you. And we hope that when you have an opportunity to lead the nation, you will do it well. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Lunch is 5. Start, take your lunch and go if you are not fasting. And even if you are fasting, you have this away, you can take it away.
Hello, yeah, Mr. Victor. Can you hear me? Hello.
Projector. We own the dropper, right?
Big one. Let's sing. Yeah, please. So let's go.
Yes, sure.
Where is the camera? Please take the photograph.
You take me photograph? Yes, please. Okay. You don't know about that the dog brought yesterday. That one they did so.
Take camera.